our top story this morning, and violence has erupted across Belfast overnight after protests over a horrific knife attack.
Just look at this machete attack. In the footage, a 30-year-old African migrant inflicts dozens of stab wounds on a local resident in the centre of Belfast. And after just 8 hours, Northern Ireland plunged into the fiercest protests. At 4:51 p.m, Enough is Enough protesters personally accused Starmer of importing hundreds of machete killers from Africa. In response, 6 police units arrived at the scene. And just in seconds, the police came under the heaviest fire from the protesters. 4 miles away, another police cordon was attacked by locals. Instantly, Starmer warned, thugs on the streets of Northern Ireland are getting up to 4 years in prison. This marked the beginning of the end. At 5:21 p.m, the Send Them Home rioters resorted to the most extreme measures. One of them stated, "We are protecting our children from machete killers on the streets." Right after, TikTok footage of the burning streets gained 8.3 million views in hours. On the ground, the emergency services workload increased by 470%. Suddenly, opposition leader Farage stated, "The fingerprints of the African illegal were not even in the police database." At 5:40 p.m, dozens of armoured vans were already filling the streets. 4 of them were attacked immediately. In another area, Stop the Boats, protesters started a ruthless clash with the police. On the ground, up to 84 injured on both sides were reported. By 5:51, for the first time in years, police used water cannons against citizens. The authorities reported, "Far-right thugs are almost suppressed, the operation continues." But not even 3 minutes passed before the roads were blocked by chaos. Explosions followed in 4 sectors at once, but then, it seemed that a war had begun. 6:02 p.m, migrant accommodations were subjected to dozens of arsons. More than 58 objects were attacked in hours. By evening, ambulance crews were operating at maximum capacity. 7:50 p.m, balaclava-clad groups began smashing storefronts. Across the battle zones, dozens of police vans lit up the streets with flashing lights and blaring sirens. Police issued a warning.
"Attention, attention, this is a police message. The crowd should disperse immediately."
But in the next 3 hours, the protests reached a breaking point. On helicopter footage, fires could be seen erupting in 12 sectors simultaneously. Reports indicated that citizens specifically targeted the apartments of newly arrived migrants from Africa and the Middle East. Nearly 110 firefighters were deployed. The number of casualties among the migrants remains unknown. Unexpectedly, the Donald Trump administration intervened. J.D. Vance stated, "Britons have the right not to see illegal migrants in their neighbourhoods." Mass protests across Britain did not emerge from a vacuum. Starmer can hide behind his prepared speeches about far-right thugs dividing the nation as much as he wants, but the numbers reveal the terrifying reality. Over 50,000 knife attacks happen annually across the country. When undocumented migrants wield machetes on residential streets and slaughter ordinary people, even Washington feels compelled to comment on the escalating horror stretching from Belfast to London. Consider the chilling mathematical truth that a new blade assault occurs every 10 minutes nationwide. Basically, this means your own child could be ambushed in broad daylight, just like the victims we saw recently. Opposition leader Nigel Farage points out a disturbing geographical pattern regarding these violent outbreaks. Unsurprisingly, a massive spike in violent crime is consistently recorded within a 10-mile radius of 3-star urban hotels. Everyone knows these facilities are actively receiving unknown military-age men subsidized entirely by British taxpayers. These individuals arrive without passports and remain completely invisible to domestic police databases. Locals watch helplessly as up to 1,000 small boat arrivals cross the UK border on a busy week. Perhaps the most infuriating aspect is that authorities possess all the demographic data regarding who is committing these new zombie knife offences. Inside the courts, judges and prosecutors hold full access to the background and legal status of every perpetrator. Under the current Labour administration, however, releasing the religion or nationality of an attacker is strictly forbidden to avoid offending anyone. Honest citizens are left completely in the dark while their neighbourhoods turn into active combat zones. Frustration naturally boils over when the government prioritises the feelings of criminals over the safety of working-class families. Look at the recent tragedy where a 30-year-old African national decimated a community's peace in a matter of seconds. Authorities admitted the suspect was simply granted leave to remain despite zero comprehensive vetting. Consequently, furious residents feel they have no choice but to take back control of their own streets. Mainstream media networks label these protective community patrols as aggressive mobs. According to Nigel Farage, the actual instigators of the violence face minimal consequences. Sirens echo through previously quiet provincial towns night after night. Taxpayers wonder why their hard-earned money funds luxury accommodations for individuals who despise British values. Opposition warns, crime statistics are carefully manipulated by Whitehall officials to paint a falsely reassuring picture. Whistleblowers within the police force admit they are instructed to look the other way to maintain diversity quotas. Any officer daring to speak against minorities faces immediate disciplinary action. Therefore, a culture of silence paralyzes the very institutions designed to protect the vulnerable. Countless families have already abandoned city centres due to the overwhelming threat of random violence. Shopkeepers install heavy steel shutters just to survive another business day. Entire districts become unmanageable exclusion zones as soon as the sun goes down. Emergency operators report unprecedented volumes of distress calls related to armed gangs. Ambulances refuse to enter certain postcodes without armed escorts. Politicians barricade themselves inside secure Westminster offices while lecturing the public on tolerance. Keir Starmer campaigned heavily on restoring strict border security, yet his administration has actively fostered a completely different reality. Confronting the root causes of imported crime is rigorously avoided if it challenges liberal orthodoxies. Every single immigration policy passed by Downing Street seems filtered through one terrifying lens. Will this provoke outrage from human rights lawyers and international courts? Nobody is asking if the British public remains safe. Consequently, undocumented individuals continue crossing the border undetected. Unvetted asylum seekers from conflict zones are handed residency like candy. Police cower in their vans to escape the chaos. Meanwhile, the country fractures a little more with each excuse Keir Starmer delivers. He labels his approach compassionate management. Ordinary citizens view it as an outright betrayal. Dread now grips not only the authorities, but the entire working class. Recently, residents realised an incredibly bitter truth. Nigel Farage says, state prosecutors will throw the book at native protesters, but act powerless against foreign criminals. Justice pursues you relentlessly, yet it grants endless appeals to those who shouldn't even be here. Your safety is negotiable, whereas the rights of unverified arrivals are sacred. Resentment tears a society apart much faster than any foreign adversary. More disturbingly, the real danger stems from leaders too afraid to enforce the law. Essentially, this is exactly how historic nations unravel, not through sudden invasion, but via systemic appeasement. During the height of the province's unrest, dispatchers desperately awaited clear instructions from the capital. Those critical orders simply never materialized. Instead, regional commanders received vague protocols that frontline responders mocked as bureaucratic cowardice. De-escalate by abandoning affected sectors, permit minor property damage to exhaust the mob, steer clear of inflaming tensions surrounding the machete attack. Inflaming tensions serves as the new Whitehall euphemism for acknowledging that a foreign national bypassed all security databases before stabbing a local resident. The British justice system has officially collapsed into a bureaucratic revolving door. Under Keir Starmer's so-called SDS-40 scheme, the concept of serving time has become an absolute illusion. Offenders are now routinely walking free after completing a mere 40% of their sentences. This astonishing policy was enacted not out of mercy, but out of sheer logistical desperation. National penitentiaries are currently operating at a staggering 99% capacity. Authorities have effectively transformed the nation into an open-air facility for repeat offenders. Over the past months alone, a shocking 40,000 convicted criminals were quietly released back onto the streets. Communities are being forced to absorb the catastrophic consequences of a state that refuses to lock up its dangerous elements. What makes this crisis even more infuriating is the Prime Minister's own professional background. As the former Director of Public Prosecutions, Starmer built his entire political brand on the promise of restoring law and order. Voters expected a tough prosecutor who would clean up the streets with uncompromising severity. Instead, they got a premier who actively authorizes the early release of thousands to artificially manipulate prison population statistics. Law enforcement officers arrest the exact same individuals week after week. Detectives watch in disbelief as suspects they just apprehended stroll out of courthouse doors days later. It is a perpetual cycle of criminality engineered directly by Whitehall's refusal to manage the nation's demographics. Opposition leader Nigel Farage recently proposed an incredibly straightforward solution to this immense nightmare. He pointed out that deporting the massive number of foreign national offenders would immediately free up thousands of critical jail cells. Why should British taxpayers continue funding the incarceration of international criminals who have zero right to be in the country? Sending these individuals back to their home nations would instantly relieve the crushing pressure on domestic infrastructure. However, Downing Street completely ignores this pragmatic approach to avoid upsetting international human rights tribunals. Addressing the root cause of the overcrowding crises remains entirely off limits for the current Labour leadership. Confronting the sheer volume of imported crime is apparently too politically sensitive for those sitting in Westminster. Consequently, the government's only official counter-proposal is to throw billions of pounds at constructing brand new prisons. Pouring concrete does absolutely nothing to stop the relentless wave of offences flooding suburban neighbourhoods. Building more cages merely accommodates the symptom rather than curing the underlying disease. Public safety is actively being sacrificed on the altar of progressive criminal justice reform. Victims of violent theft and assault are receiving letters explaining that their attackers are already being reintegrated into society. Rehabilitation has effectively been replaced by rapid evacuation protocols designed solely to empty overcrowded wings. Judges are reportedly receiving internal memos advising against custodial sentences for anything short of the most heinous atrocities. Shoplifting, burglary, and street harassment have been practically decriminalized by stealth. Small business owners bear the financial brunt of this catastrophic legal vacuum every single day. Shuttered high streets serve as grim monuments to a government that prioritizes the comfort of convicts over the security of taxpayers. Every early release represents another calculated gamble with an innocent citizen's life. Statistically, a significant portion of those freed under the SDS 40 mandate will re-offend within weeks of leaving the gates. Emergency responders are the ones left cleaning up the blood when these bureaucratic gambles inevitably fail. Meanwhile, the political elite remains safely guarded by armed protection units behind iron fences. They never have to cross paths with the individuals their signature policies let loose into working-class districts. Disillusionment among the electorate has reached levels not seen in modern British history. People genuinely cannot comprehend how a supposed legal expert could oversee the fastest degradation of the justice system ever recorded. Starmer's tenure will likely be remembered not for prosecuting criminals, but for facilitating their mass exodus. Foreign syndicates openly mock a country that is too terrified to deport their convicted operatives. London's leadership acts as if expanding the prison estate is a triumph, rather than an admission of societal failure. True stability requires enforcing borders and maintaining sentences, not managing an endless conveyor belt of early pardons. Tax-paying families are essentially being held hostage by a systemic refusal to enforce basic legal boundaries.